On today's episode, you'll hear how authentic conversations between two cybersecurity experts, and when I say authentic, I mean a little bit of edgy, maybe there's some whiskey involved. Yeah, these conversations have not only led to the company growing and gaining awareness and achieving all those important business goals, but also the podcast itself has top charts in the US and the UK for listenership. Guys, I think they're on to something. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, True Marketing. True is a full service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit truemarketing.com. And now on with our podcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. I'm joined today by Justin Fimlaid and Jack Danahay, and they're both from NuHarbor. Justin's the CEO of the company, and Jack is the Vice President of Product and Engineering. Welcome to the show, you two.
I'm glad to be here, Wendy.
Thanks for having us.
Good. I already feel a little bit intimidated. You guys sound like you have this wonderful podcast voice and very smooth. You must be a little bit experienced in this thing. What do you think?
Speak for Jack.
No, I think it's just sort of the way that it comes out. A lot of what we do in security is about helping people understand why it's important. And so while a lot of people recognize that cybersecurity is a super technical space, a lot of what folks like Justin and I have to do on a day-to-day basis is help people understand why it's important, why they should prioritize it. And so I think maybe what you're hearing is just the fact that we just talk too much.
It might be. I don't know. We'll find out.
No, that's definitely true. I concur with the talking too much piece.
Well, cybersecurity, I need to hear more about that. So why don't we start with the basics here? Tell me a little bit about your company, NuHarbor.
Yeah, so NuHarbor Security is a cybersecurity firm. We are an end-to-end provider of cybersecurity solutions. And really, we exist today to provide a portfolio of solutions to, enterprise IT leaders, whether it be CIO or CISOs, chief information officers or chief information security officers, to help them deliver a comprehensive cybersecurity program. And, as an organization, we do a lot. We cover a lot of ground as it relates to cybersecurity, but I think really what we do is we help make cybersecurity easier and more consumable for our clients, right? And when you think about cybersecurity, the question comes up is saying, people kind of get glossed over really quick because they don't really understand the term and everything that comes with it. And it seems super, super hard and super, super complex. What we try to do is make that easier for our clients. And in the course of educating them and making them aware of the options that are in front of them, and helping to educate them as to what a good path might look like for that individual organization, we make it more consumable for them. And because we're making it more consumable for them, we're able to create outcomes, successful outcomes that, in my opinion, haven't really existed in the market. And it's what the market needs today. So at the end of the day, all those things, we are very good at helping our clients win at cybersecurity.
And Wendy, if I could, I think this part of this, it's a genesis story. And I think it's one of the reasons why the podcast that we do resonates, but it's also why the company has a very different message. Justin was enormously successful as a CISO in his own right. And he started the company because he recognized that the way in which cybersecurity companies typically delivered the technologies and the services on top of them was super Byzantine, right? Really, really hard to understand. And the reason I came on about a year ago was because I saw somebody who was trying to bring these things together, because nobody really cares about cybersecurity, right? Nobody wakes up in the morning unless you're cybersecure. security person says, hey, I think I'll do some cybersecurity today, right? Look at you. You're over there. I'm going to go help people get their message across, right? I'm going to help them as you've helped us. We're going to go do great things and get the market to understand what we do. Or maybe you're selling something in retail, or you're building cars, whatever the hell it is. You're not caring about cybersecurity. And what Justin recognized was they just wanted the outcome. They wanted to be secure, right? And so when Justin started the company, the premise was it's possible to provide this comprehensive set of things together because he felt the pain, right? And so I think he's too self-effacing to say it, right? But there's part of this, the reason why the company is successful and the message works is because he felt the pain and he was determined to try to help other people feel less pain. And so I think that's a big part of the genesis story of the company.
Yeah, and I think the message really resonates with people, right? Is saying like, I've literally sat on their side of the table. They say like, you haven't walked in my shoes. It's like, yeah, in fact, we've walked a few miles.
Want to bet?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think with it, like the message and the articulation of the pain point, like really, really resonates with people, and how to come to a conclusion and solve the challenge resonates. So, it works. Working.
Yeah, I know on your website, you tell a little bit about that backstory and describe all these different siloed functions that help a security officer, but none of them integrate together. None of them talk to each other. And so you laid out that problem statement in a way that it really shows you've been in their shoes, you know how challenging this is, and you just want it to work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like trying to bake cookies. Really, when like if I draw an analogy, it's like someone shows up with all the ingredients, but you don't have a recipe and you've never cooked before and you don't know how to put them together. And if you have a pile of ingredients but no recipe, you're left to your own vices to come up with whatever you come up with. And you may get it right. It may look like a batch of cookies, but there's also a chance it's probably not going to look like that. And they may not taste very good.
Well, hopefully what you're serving up tastes good. It goes out well. What type of company do you generally work with? Is it more in the public sector, private sector, any certain vertical?
Yeah, it's both. So we are an equal opportunity cybersecurity firm. But we have over the years really developed an expertise for SLED, which is state, local, and higher education. Today, that represents about 60% of our business today, as far as revenue and count of clients. So from a market segmentation standpoint, we play really, really well in the mid cap space in larger size enterprise. And for us, what mid-cap means, it's organizations above 50 million in revenue, up to 2 billion in revenue. And then large enterprise being above $2 billion in revenue. The reason for that being, for our services and our solutions, one, company needs to have enough revenue, enough market presence to have all the cybersecurity demands and needs that we offer and provide. Also, when you get into mid-cap space, they have all the needs of a large enterprise, but don't necessarily have all the staff that's required in order to operationalize cybersecurity. So our company plays really, really well in that space. When we start to get into the large enterprise space, we're one of the best in the business at what we do, and we have a deep bench of expertise, and we're able to kind of scale with our clients. And the relationship obviously morphs and evolves as you go from a mid cap into an enterprise space, as you would expect within any business. There's a different demand for scale that exists for larger clients. And so over the years, we've been able to build that out. So we've been able to accommodate both very, very well.
I so appreciate, as a marketer, a business executive that knows exactly who they should be working with and what that offering is and who they shouldn't be, because then it helps with your messaging and your marketing strategy, just be spot on with, who you're targeting. So good articulation of that for sure. Before we get on, because I really want to talk about your brand and tone and get into some of the really unique things you guys are doing. But before I do, I have to know, how did the two of you meet?
You want to see that?
Sure. So Justin and I have a common friend. Her name is Amy Hermes. And number one, she's phenomenally smart, but she's also just a wonderful networker, right? And so we were both engaged with her in an effort she had put forth to put technology strategy kinds of people like us in front of investors, private equity investors, institutional investors, to help them understand what's happening in cybersecurity. So at the time we met, the first time we met, I had just done a piece in Forbes on the fact that cybersecurity has to be more like healthcare. And we'll do that in some other show at some other time. But the idea is basically cybersecurity is not very much about technology, no more than healthcare is about an X-ray machine, right? Cybersecurity is about healthcare, like you want to stay healthy, right? And so I'm off running my mouth about that. And then this guy is on one of these panels with me, and he's talking about how he built this company, and he believes this comprehensive offer will allow the outcome production that'll actually solve the problem that these companies had around cybersecurity. I'm like, wow, that sounds really familiar. And so we just started talking, right? And at one point in time, some of the investors like, wow, this would be great, put this whole thing together, do a roll up. And Justin said, oh, the hell with that. Let's just go to work, right? And he said, you want to come play? And I said, hell yeah, let's come play. And I never expected it to be the way that this is. There's a very authentic feel about NuHarbor. There's a real commitment to trying to solve this sort of critical problem. It's almost like, strap the cape on in the morning, kind of solve the problem for people. And to me, it felt really good, right? And there's also, as you can tell by the fact that we're sort of sitting here doing our thing, it is a very real place. And so we met in that way, came aboard in this way, and I'm a very different business exec than I was when I was running the companies or working with IBM. It's just a very, very different approach.
Yeah, and I wouldn't up until that, the point where we were first kind of meeting each other and started to share ideas and kind of talk about our views of the world. There seemingly was a point where we've been talking about doing this thing, and we were kind of at that fork in the road where it was seeming like our paths were going to start to diverge a little bit. And I remember talking with Jack one day, hang up, I was like, damn, I'm actually going to really miss working with this guy. And then I was like, wait a second, what the hell am I doing? So I called him back. I was like, Jack, should we do this? And we had some ideas we talked about, and directionally things that we wanted to do. And yeah, Jack said, yeah, hell yeah, let's keep it going. So that was a year ago, and it feels like, I mean, we've gotten a lot done. Like on one hand, like I look back, it's like I feel like Jack's been here forever, just the volume of stuff that we've done, but we've also had so much fun. Like I feel like
10 minutes.
Yeah, it feels like it's 10 minutes. Yeah. Pretty great.
Well, your alignment and your philosophy and approach to this market is very clear. And so from there, it sounds like you have a lot of complementary skill sets and ideas, and it all just works. So how wonderful. So tell me a little bit about your brand, and specifically what I like to talk about is I feel like your brand tone and voice is not quite your typical B2B brand. So how would you describe your brand's personality?
Our brand is one that's tastefully edgy. Which to me is like, that's a hard balance to strike.
It really is.
And, it's something that we've worked with over the years. And I philosophically believe when it comes to like branding and marketing is you build it for yourself, right? We build our brands for myself and for Jack and for Holly. And, that feels good to us. And actually, I don't really care about anybody else. Like I honestly don't. It's a symbol of art and marketing, and people are going to get behind it or they aren't. And if they don't, like, I'm not sure I really care that much because it's not made for them. Right. And when I look at like our audience and who our audience is and who we represent a very specific type of person who's been in the cybersecurity industry and who's felt the pain and the challenges, and they're dealing with all the same things that we've dealt with. And so we talk about our brand and what it represents is like, we are one of those people. And if they want to get behind our brand and who we are, like, that's awesome, because you're part of our group and who we're trying to market and who we're trying to be part of. and we want to be united and unified with them.
Yeah.
I fully recognize there's a population of people whom don't conform to that. And I would say to those individuals and anybody who's marketing is like, it wasn't made for them, which is totally fine. Like, you have a message that is for a specific person, and that's great. But you also have to be fine with, there's the people who aren't going to subscribe to that, and that's okay. It's not made for them. Just let it go. And I also believe that you never try to convert your haters. Never try to convert your haters. It is a complete waste of time. And there's people that will dig in their heels just to dig in their heels. Rather, let your fans convert your haters. Like, create your Rolodex of fans and let them, kind of make, like, convert the next people. And as long as you do that, you kind of do what's comfortable to you, view the world through like your lens. Like, art is up to you. Your brand is up to you. And it's not the tools that you have at your disposal. It's the way that you see the world. And that's kind of how we've constructed stuff, right? It's something that's edgy, but we also want to be respectful and tasteful. And I feel like we've been able to pull that off.
Wait, if I could jump in for a second, because I arrived at this when this culture was fully in flight, right? And this brand was fully in flight. And I came from a much more traditional background, right? The second company bought by IBM, it's all these big companies doing their thing. And one of the first things I said to Captain Authentic over here was like, are we sure we want to have, this kind of imagery? Because typically cybersecurity buyers, that's not their thing. They tend to be more conservative. And look at all the success we've had in public sector. And there are statewide CIOs who love this place. And they talk to each other. I said, you sure you want to, be branding this way? And he's like, yeah, the hell with it. And it was really interesting to me, because I'm like, all right, great, let's go. And I find that the more we hew to that authentic belief in who we are, because security is a little bit edgy, you'd be dumbfounded by like these brilliant state officers, these public servants who you tend to think about as being relatively buttoned down, relatively conservative. They're like, hey, can I have another shirt? Right? Because they see themselves in the way that the company represents itself. Their inner self is very edgy. Their inner self knows they're fighting the battle every day. They're fighting the bad guys and bad gals every single day. And they feel like that person that Justin describes. And so it is made for them, right? In a lot of ways, this brand is made for them, but I never would have seen it because security people don't market themselves this way.
No, they don't. I think it makes you unique and memorable. And it kind of, for them, I'm sure it's, hey, cybersecurity can be cool. It could be something fun and approachable. And yes, Mr. Authenticity there.
And
Like
frankly,
that.
Wendy, it could be positive too, right? Because if you look at the way a lot of people talk about cybersecurity, it's always, oh, danger, hackers, money, wham. And it's all like super horrible, right? Intractable problem. So you need us. It's not like that here. Right here, it's like, we're going to help you be better. We're going to make it easier for you to know that you're getting better. We're not going to create an image of security. We're not going to pretend that this is horrible so you can get more budget. We're going to tell the truth. We're going to find simple ways to tell the truth and be authentic in what we teach you about your security. And I think it really resonates, and it is really based in that authentic belief that we can make things better and we're going to do it our way.
There's I believe there's a real power in the authenticity of all of this. It's if you'll get to know me over time, Wendy, but like, I am a huge Rick Rubin fan. Like, if someone said to you, Justin, who's the one person in this world that you want to meet and you would like love to have dinner with, it's Rick Rubin. Just going on record. That hopefully, if Rick Rubin ever like listens to this, just
if he's a Wendy follower,
a Wendy follower.
If you're listening, Rick, give us a call.
Yes.
Yeah, but Rick is if for people who don't know him, he's a famous music producer. And if you look at like his discography from over like the years, like he's produced like any like major album that's come up over like the last 20 years, like. Just big bands. Like he's the guy that does all the artistry and, kind of has the vision behind the music. But he had a saying, which I really like. And I'm kind of paraphrasing it a little bit, but he said, in in the world of everything being perfect and everybody trying to have the perfect message and find the perfect words and the perfect tone, there's something really honest about being less perfect, right? And being more human. And when you can be more human and you create that authenticity, that's the audience that you want to capture, because ultimately deep down it pulls at the heartstring of like who they are, and it's something that people can relate to a little bit more. And and with that, to me, when I think about marketing and keeping that in mind, it's a lot about the unity principle of how we live and operate. And we talked about this before. Like I've walked a mile in our clients' shoes, like a lot of miles actually, like worn out the treads at this point.
A couple of pairs of shoes.
Yeah, a couple of pairs of shoes. But with it, there's this idea of the unity principle, which is because we are the same, and because we are human, and because we have this commonality, there's a credibility that kind of comes with it, right? And people can get behind that, right? And you create those fans like I talked about earlier. But I almost feel like in trying to be too perfect, you alienate a population of buyers in a way that I don't think people actually really mean to, right? Like you try to come across as a brand as something being excellent and perfect. But in actuality, like buyers can see through that. Like consumers are pretty smart these days. And there becomes a point where the world is trying to be perfect. Consumers will look at it and be like, well, it's kind of BS. Like that's not the way like the world is, or like, that's not exactly my problem. Or I know the problem well enough to know like, that's not perfectly how you would solve it. And it's not solved by everything that you said. And you do that enough, like you completely lose credibility, and you actually have the opposite effect of what you're intending to do. So I believe it's really rooted in that like authenticity, really being human, showing your imperfections, and like being comfortable with it. Like who freaking cares nowadays? Like I certainly don't, you know? So.
It reminds me a lot of the old days, let's say in the early 90s, where you'd have these very polished corporate overview videos. And otherwise, you wouldn't see video at all, right? It had to be like perfect and, the lighting just right and the professional studio coming in to produce this, or nothing. And now you see people, look, we're on Zoom, right? I have my webcam up and maybe there's a ring light in the background, but it's still pretty authentically us. And so
what are you saying, Wendy? This isn't a perfect shoot setting? Is that what you're saying?
Perhaps not on my end, at least. I mean, you guys look amazing. I know you have your makeup artist in the background and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The makeup artist is Holly's going to make up for the mistakes we make.
Yeah, right. So, it's that balance between having something that's quality, but also credible. And, and I'm sure it applies to, cybersecurity, kind of like content marketing. We have like some messiness in these services, right? It's not this formulaic thing. Follow this and life will be great. There's a lot of nuance to what we do. And I think being honest about the struggles and the warts and the new things that happen, and, it's all help. We're on this journey together, right?
Yeah. It's interesting when you mentioned like your business and our business, right? Yeah. I think in your business, and your team is super effective. I've had the pleasure of dealing with them, right? It is, we're going to do a great job of getting the message out, but you're not going to say, and by the way, Jack, you and Justin are going to touch every single potential buyer of the thing that you care about. It's not the way you do your business. To Justin's point, in cybersecurity, because people's ultimate goal is, I want to be perfectly safe, right? As irrational as that may be, that's what they want. And the creation of that perfect messaging that Justin talks about is that some security companies or security firms or services firms will say, now you're secure. Right? No one will ever get on record and say you're perfectly secure, but that's sort of the image that they give, right?
Right.
They try to craft their stories so that this widget solves all of those problems for you.
Guaranteed.
Really close. And we've talked about this in the podcast many times, right? The fact that people overstate what they do. And if instead you say, by the way, here's all the stuff we do. And by the way, here's all the things you've done lately. And by the way, here's why you made a great decision to go with NuHarbor as an example, or whatever, right? Here's how you demonstrate that you've gotten better, because getting better is really what they need. Even if perfect is somewhere in the distance, no runner ever thinks they're done training. No lifter ever thinks they're done training. No golfer ever thinks they're done swinging. You're always trying to get better. And that's cybersecurity. But in our market, because people's ultimate goal is to be secure, right? A lot of firms' marketing portrays themselves in that light. And to Justin's point, it's entirely ineffectual because ultimately something bad happens and they intentionally or unintentionally have been lying. And it
And
really
people
does a lot
see
of
right
harm.
through it, it sounds like, too. I mean,
100%.
yeah. Well, you mentioned the podcast, so why don't we talk about that for a little bit? What is the name?
Sure. The name is poh-nd, PWNED. It's an industry term that just refers to you're poh-nd when somebody's taken over your systems and gotten your stuff. And Justin and the team had a very, very successful podcast for a number of years prior to my arrival here. Right. It tended to be more technically focused. There's a lot of brilliant people here, my colleague here on the left included, and a lot of review of relatively technical stuff about how did a breach happen? What's an exploit? What's a way to recommend better best practices? All those kinds of things. And then for about a year, because things were crazy during the pandemic, what have you, they hadn't really done very much. And when I joined, Justin's like, hey, what do you think? Let's want to spin this up again. And in season 3 took on a very different tone, right? Mainly because I'm like an idiot, right? So we have these different kinds of conversations and it's focused in different areas, right? We on the podcast for those limited number of you who aren't already subscribed, there's different types of topics we talk about. We talk about M&A in the cybersecurity industry in a set of episodes that we call Right Swipes, which is basically based on the idea that did you make the right choice or the bad choice 2 o'clock in the bar, right? And this is about cybersecurity acquisition because a lot of it happens, M&A in cybersecurity. There's Breach of the Week, where we talk about the impacts of what happened. And more importantly, we do a deep review of how it happened and the lessons that can be learned from it. We do a lot of current event stuff. We talk about it. And, we have other episodes where things fall into what we call the pit of despair. Security is a terrible place for marketing, where the words that are used have been either beaten hollow or so overused they're worthless. And we cast terms into the pit of despair. And if either one of us makes the mistake of using those terms in the course of any episode thereafter, we have to partake of the glorious old Forrester 1920 Prohibition era edition, right? And it just makes it more interesting. So it's a very broad ranging set of topics. It's no longer simply really great technical content. We touch a lot of the bases that I think a lot of our listeners are interested in because you don't get that taste anywhere else.
Yeah, we've kind of taken the position of trying to educate our users first. There's a variety of topics like Jack just mentioned, but in all cases, there's a message that I think we just want to make people aware of, right? A different perspective, a different way to look at it, and whether it's super technical in nature or it's like a breach of the week type of scenarios, and we try to get into the details of how the exploit actually occurred. Or it's like Jack said, it's a swipes episode, and there's kind of some business lessons that might have to be had, or some considerations, right? Some things to think about. And my goal, speaking of myself, is really just try to get people to think about the problem space a little bit differently and consider perhaps different angles, with the hopes if they're faced with something similar in the future, it allows them to see around corners in a way that they might not have been able to without hearing us.
And I think what you find is, one of the reasons I think we've been fortunate enough to be in the top 100 a number of times, right, in the US and the UK for the stories that we're given, is because we're telling those stories in a way that it's kind of funny because it's the way we think about it. And Justin and I say this all the time. I think one of the reasons why we do the episodes and we do as many as we do is because it's remarkably therapeutic for us. Justin and I were having conversations 6 months ago about the hypervaluation of the cybersecurity market. That why are these valuations so high? And his favorite phrase, which I love, which is the ponies and party hats, right? The unicorn crowd, right? All these cybersecurity companies becoming unicorns with no real reason behind it. You look at the financials, you do the analysis, and you dig in, there's not much there. And we're like, something bad is going to happen in the future, right? That this overspending, this hypervaluation, this volatility in the market is going to have a negative impact. And boom, you look 2 months ago, right? And now we get to do the podcast that says, we're really sad. This isn't Schadenfreude. We're really sad it happened, but you had to see it coming. right? And so it's very therapeutic for us. And
Called
I think
it.
yeah, fact. And I think that therapeutic angle provides, some of that real or sort of organic, it's our honest voice, coming through to the listeners. And I think that's why they listen.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
have a burning question. Did you choose to do this in a podcast format because you thought it was the best way to reach your target audience, or because you really like to talk to each other and mull over these subjects and it just seemed like an easy way to do it? Or is there a door number 3 to this?
I think it's a little bit of a hybrid. Honestly, I feel like it's evolved a little bit over the years. Initially, when we started, it was in my garden shed at like 1 or 2 in the morning, like out back, hoping that that loud trucks didn't drive by unexpectedly. And we did a way to kind of market and get our name out. And I don't really feel like it was really the most effective way, because I feel like we're making it for someone else, right? From marketing standpoint. That's evolved over the years. We're now approaching 200 episodes. And I think what it's evolved into is a little bit of what Jack said. And it was like, kind of do it for ourselves. Like, it's really therapeutic. And, there's a lot of times where we'll make something, we'll have a conversation, we'll create a piece of content, or like, do you think anybody's going to care about it? And then I look at Jack, I was like, well, you're going to listen to it? He's like, yeah. He says to me, you're going to listen? I was like, yeah. I'm like, then why the hell do we care?
And we're good.
We made it for us. As long as we have 2 listens, we're good. But again, coming back to like the unity principle is like, people resonate with that. There's other people that would be interested in the conversations. And if I guess if I had to sum it up, Wendy, I would characterize it as, we've evolved from the point where we made content for the podcast. Like, the podcast exists for the content. Now we generate the content and we just happen to record it for the podcast. And we've kind of flipped that around. It's like, these are conversations Jack and I have anyway.
Yeah.
Like,
fact.
We talk about this stuff all day long. And there's honestly that there's a lot of times Jack and I are talking. We're like, hey, should we just hit record on this?
Hurry, get in the studio.
Yeah.
Or
exactly.
put a pin in that. Let's
yeah.
Schedule it for next week.
Yeah. Like, philosophically, like, the approach to content has changed, and it's a lot more organic. And I feel like it's a lot more honest now than what it has been in the past.
There. Well, tell me about, so we have this podcast, and then how does it I think we talked a little bit about it how it speaks to your audience, but I'm wondering how it aligns with your business goals and how it fits into the rest of your marketing efforts. Because obviously, as much as you want to record these conversations for posterity between the 2 of you, you also want to have a growing business that's flourishing. And so you kind of want people to listen and it to work with a broader strategy. So maybe speak to that.
Well, I mean, part of what you can think about the podcast as, it's the initial point for a lot of good content that arises, right? I think we're really fortunate. The conversations that we have are meaty, right? We're not talking about lightweight topics. We're talking about, really relatively high value content that people care about.
Yeah.
And so what you'll find is we get through an episode, and if it's an episode on something meaningful, like how do I hire a CISO, right? On the back end of that, we'll actually take a transcript. We'll pick up all the smart things that are said during the course of it, and we'll create from that a document, right, that turns into, I believe we've got a checklist out there that you can go through. We've got a sample job description you can use if you're a client. You go to our podcast, you go to the show notes page, click on the site, it takes you to our website. It helps you understand how to pick up a CISO. We've got a blog post of how to hire a super CISO that goes up on LinkedIn. Right. And so from that one thing, which is the 2 of us, John, about how hard it is for folks to find a talented CISO, particularly when they don't know how to hire security people in the first place, all these other artifacts, are derived from it. And I think there's also a piece of this that our core customers, the people we're looking to close, are closing on trust, right? They're closing on trust. If you don't trust someone, you don't trust them with your security. It is one of the most intimate relationships an outsourced provider can have with a company. And I think these conversations, to a point Justin made earlier, like us or hate us, right? You're going to know us. And I think that part of what this does in driving our core business value is it helps them understand who NuHarbor is in a way that is very, very difficult to do through a marketing slick, 2-page glossy, or something that happens. And so the combination of those two things, and I'm sure Justin's got more, but for me at least, those two things, the capacity to multi-purpose the content into a variety of forms that gets people interested. And secondly, the ability that allows them to truly see who we are so that they can trust us and get them over that hurdle in the buying cycle. I think both are really important to our core business.
Yeah, I see it as as an awareness engine to a lot of initiatives that we're working on. And the way I see our content and what we do, when I look about all of the listeners, that download and subscribe and share. I like to think for as many as those people are, and having all the success that we had, if we help just one person, was it worth it? Was it worth all this time and opportunity costs and everything that comes with it? You did all that, but you really helped one person. Was it worth it? I think the answer is absolutely yes. It's hell yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's really it. I mean, for me, driving awareness, just trying to find that one person. And honestly, I'm fully aware, I may never know who that person is, that we've materially helped out a lot. And if there's someone out there who we've helped a lot, I would love to know that we did do it. But based on people that reach out to us from all over the globe, it's countries that we never thought we'd be able to reach, and to have them write us a note that our message resonates, and thanks for helping them through stuff. I'd like to think we're making an impact, so to that extent, there's almost this Mother Teresa approach to this, where it feels good to help people out.
Absolutely. And maybe importantly, Wendy, we never sell on the podcast. Never. We're never talking about NuHarbor being great, although it is. We're never talking about the services we offer or all that. Everything we do is in the context of what Justin describes, which is educating the listeners and giving them the information they're looking for and having a blast.
Yeah.
Right. It's not sales oriented. It's just not what it is.
Right.
So if there's a marketer or a business owner listening and they're thinking, we've thought about starting a podcast, but I don't know. What advice do you have for them?
Well, I'll let Justin finish because he's going to have to close the closing statement. This particular one, I would have been thinking it 3 times through. Right, I'm like, nah, who's ever going to listen? I would have been saying I don't have that many interesting things to say. I would have said it's a crowded marketplace. I would have said I'll be drowned in the noise of it. Mm-hmm. And sort of, I have this internal dialogue going on, and it turns into, so Justin, are we sure we want to do this? And he's like, yeah, the hell with it, just do it. And so you jump in and you do it, and you talk about things you think are interesting. You talk about things that you think are important. You talk about things that you think you can add some value to the conversation and not just be meowing all the time, right?
Big one.
And it works, right? And so for me, I would tell that person, ignore your inner voice, right? Ignore your sense of self-doubt, and just go talk about stuff you know. And believe me, you know more than some people who are going to come and want to listen to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would echo all of what Jack said. I think, to me, when asked me that question, the most important thing I would say is just start.
Yeah.
I say you just start. And you know what? It's not going to be perfect to start, but you're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn a ton. You're going to learn about the tones and inflections and syntaxes you use on how you describe things. But over time, you're going to get better. Right. And that's all you can ask for. If you just commit to improving a small amount every single episode, you would be floored how much better your 5th episode is from your 1st, your 10th is from your 5th, your 20th is from your 1st. And what will happen is you look back over time, and you realize how far you've actually come. And what you'll be left with is gratitude. That would be I'm so thankful that I started. And, it's what I told Jack and Holly pretty early on is we should absolutely be embarrassed of the 1st episode of the season. And if we're not, we're doing something wrong, because we're going in the same direction, or we're going in the opposite direction, or the direction we don't want to go. And by the time you get to the 50th episode, like we should look back at the first episode and just be horrified. Like, I can't believe we sounded like that. And if you can do that, you know, and just kind of start building that muscle, it's a really good thing. But, you know, I would also add for anybody else is, you know, who might be thinking about getting started, is in the course of just getting started, you're also practicing communicating your craft, which people don't really practice, and you don't really have an avenue or a venue to practice. But in the course of having these conversations, the way I see it is, if someone off the street and came and asked me about these topics, is like, because I talked about it in the podcast and this person has now subsequently asked me about it, am I going to be better or worse or more conversant or less conversant about talking with them about this topic? And the answer is, I'm going to be more versed. I'm going to be more conversant because I've already talked about it a couple of times. So now I'm a little bit more of an influencer. I'm a little bit more familiar with the market. And I'm able to help that individual perhaps in ways that I couldn't have otherwise. So it's almost like you're practicing for when the game shows up. So is the way I see it.
You mentioned before, and we're almost out of time, but I have to ask this real fast. You mentioned if you had helped even this one person, and you may not ever know who they are, then you've done your job. And that sounds great. But lots of people listening are saying, I'm going to need some metrics and ways to measure whether or not this pretty big time investment is worth it. So are there other metrics that you point to know that you're headed in the right direction, besides looking back at that cringe-worthy, you know, episode 1 of each season?
Well, sure. I mean, we track it, right? And one of the reasons we've been so pleased with some of the performances is because we do pay attention to it, right? You know, showing up in Chartable in the top 100 in the US and UK, you know, frequently. It's a big deal for us, right? Because it means the message is getting out, and typically it's getting out to a lot of people who haven't heard from us before. Holly does a great job in helping us to track, you know, what's happening in terms of our statistics. The one thing we're going to do, though, honestly, Wendy, I'm going to ask you a serious question, right? How much time really is this? Right? Justin and I sit down for an hour with Holly. We sing and we dance and we leave. We're smarter for our own business. To Justin's point, we're better at talking about what we do and what people care about. So is it really such a big investment to have the same conversation you'd have in your office or at the bar in front of a microphone so you can help other people learn the same lessons you're talking about? It's not. So I'd call into question the premise if somebody says, oh, it's so much work. BS, right? It's not that much work. This is a conversation you probably should be having anyway. Just turn the microphones on and see what happens.
Yeah, I like that. I would, if there's any, I actually like that a ton.
Well, thanks.
My
work here is done. Gotta go.
Yeah, I think it's, I'm not sure I can really say it better, but if there's any metric to track, it's, to me, it's an engagement metric. How many people have you touched or impacted? But I think Jack's exactly right. It's, if you're doing this, you're doing everything that you should be doing. The benefit of that stands alone, right? And marketing aside for a second, just the practice of building this muscle is going to serve you dividends later. And, you know, if the side benefit is marketing and maybe you get a lead, maybe you don't, like, I don't know, to me, like the primary benefit of building that muscle is still incredibly awesome. And if you happen to get a business lead out of it, like, that's awesome too. Yeah.
Oh, I think you're being modest. I have a feeling you get quite a few business leads out of this show.
Yeah.
Good. Well, before we close out here, how can our listeners learn more about NuHarbor and connect with you guys?
We have our website's a pretty good brochure for our company. As we mentioned, poh-nd, the Information Security Podcast. You can find it on Apple or any other podcast syndication engine. I think we're on all of them today. So can find us there. If you want us to reach out, it's info@NuHarborSecurity.com is a good way to reach out. If you wanted to reach out to me personally, my email is just justin@NuHarborSecurity.com. And I think we got Jack at NuHarborSecurity.com. Jack, J
Danahay at, one important thing for listeners, if they have questions about this, how we did all this mess, if they have questions about cybersecurity, if they've got questions about the podcast, They can also send the question to info@NuHarborSecurity.com, because we get a lot of questions from our listeners there as well, right? And we do a whole set of issues, a whole set of episodes on mailbag. So we've had questions from how do I get into security to how do I solve this problem? So sure, should I buy this product? All that nonsense. So there's a bunch of different ways to touch us. We're happy to hear.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's NuHarbor, NuHarbor, and poh-nd is PWNED. So for those of you listening, I'll put links in the show notes. And thank you to you both. This was really interesting and enlightening. And the philosophical alignment between the two of you, stellar. Love it.
Wendy, thanks a million.
All right. Cheers. Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.